ahead and get started. It's 9 o'clock. I'd like to call the budget workshop for the Village of Cary on January 22nd to order with roll call, please.
Weinhammer? Here. Cavelli? Here. Duda?
Here.
Collier?
Here.
Walrath?
Here.
McAlpine? Here.
Would you join me in the pledge of allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will open and close open forum since there's nobody here at 9:01. Move to the item at hand here. Turn over to Mr. Wright.
Thank you, Mayor, Village Board. Thanks for coming out on this Saturday. This is our annual CIP review. We enjoy doing this with you just to make sure that we are in alignment. Staff has a good idea of what we think the important projects and priorities should be, and want to make sure that we're aligned with you. So we'll get right into it. Our agenda for today, we'll remind you of why we do this. What is the CIP? Talk about the various projects that we have, go through all the departments, and then finally we'll land on that last slide where we show all the funding, the exciting slide where we talk about
Show me the money.
some potential shortfalls that we have, some areas where we have to work on. Our budget schedule for this budget year, here we are today for our first budget meeting. Second budget meeting will be on March 12th. That's where we'll review the general fund. Also, we'll review all the other fund, but the main focus on that meeting is the general fund, and then final consideration of the budget we're planning for in our first meeting of weeks. Again, reminder, most importantly here is we want to inform you, have a conversation. This is why we have it set up. Like we do, we're trying this out. It's a little bit different than what we've done before, but have a conversation with you about projects. Want to be able to answer any questions that you have related to those projects. The majority of these projects that you'll see today aren't going to be new. Most of these you have seen before. We do have a couple new ones that we'll talk about just to, I guess, keep you on toes and get your feedback on if we're trending in the right direction. We'll have a little bit more of a focused discussion as we did last year on the road network, and then also want to get some of your feedback on the downtown. Moving a couple pieces around with the downtown project that we have planned over the next few years. And then finally, as a reminder, I think you all know that this is purely just for discussion. We're looking to get your feedback. Again, make sure that we are aligned with what your vision is for our community for the next 5 years. So we've got a whole group of folks that are going to help us out here. Kelly's going to take us for the next few slides.
Hi, good morning. So let's answer the question first. What is a capital improvement plan? So it's a 5-year plan that identifies the current and future needs of the village. Essentially, it's an overview of potential projects, the costs associated with the projects, while also comparing expected revenues and potential funding sources to allow for completion of these projects. This is just a quote. I know a lot of you saw it last year as well that Jake had found that he liked. I think it's just a good reminder or representation of why it's important to complete a capital improvement plan. So why complete a capital improvement plan? So capital projects are one of the largest expenditures. So by identifying these projects and the costs associated, allows the village board to prioritize and make informed decisions. Also helps reduce any surprise costs, and it allows for transparency, not just to the village, but also to the staff and the residents of Cary. So here we have some of the CIP accomplishments that have occurred so far in fiscal 22. Obviously, we're not completed with the fiscal year yet. The biggest one, obviously, is our new beautiful municipal center. The other one of note is the former Metro Depot has finally been demolished.
We'll get an amen on that.
So we'll start off today's discussion with facility maintenance and improvements. So no longer the newest building in the village. Public Works building was actually constructed in 2002, and there are a few capital maintenance projects that need to be completed. including repairing light poles, garage fixtures, reconfiguring shared spaces for training purposes, as well as updating technology, continuing to digitize our files. You can see there in the image, we have quite a few files in the mezzanine storage area. And then we also have other repairs like roof repairs, carpet and tile repairs, as well as some painting.
A lot of those, if we can just step back to just the design board. A lot of those files that we had in the mezzanine area relate to Village Hall and former Village Hall files that we had down at the senior center. We had a workers' compensation claim several years ago related to moving stuff out of the senior center, and that's when we made a decision to move items up to that mezzanine area. So I know that Public Works is excited for those to be taken out of there because they're not really Public Works items. So the big goal was, getting us moved into this building. I think that's the next step is to clean that out so that Public Works is able to utilize that purely for Public Works related items. They've been gracious, Eric has been gracious to share his space here with us for a little while.
Jake, so it's a 20-year-old building now. What's the useful life there?
I hope all our buildings will be at least 50, 75-year buildings. Public Works is a little bit different than what we have up here. It's more utilitarian. I see a lot of concrete block down there, but we do, and we will get into a few items here. The mayor and I actually went down on Thursday to get a tour of Public Works. It needs some love.
It does.
It needs some help.
It hasn't been painted or carpeted in 20 years, and it shows. Well, it's just you look at these, the conditions that our employees are working in there. It's really, you saw the pictures of the falling in ceilings, and that's an issue. And we need to update our technology there. We had a great conversation. That map you see in the upper left hand, that's vital to their daily tasks. And when they're out plowing, it shows all the different routes that they take and where people are, and that. So it's important that we continue to move on with the technology with Public Works, because that's the direction that we need to go.
So here's just a summary table of those repairs. And then also in the out years, we're listing a building LED conversion, which could be eligible for grants or ComEd rebates. So we're looking at around $292,000. For the municipal center, for the next year, staff is recommending budgeting around $50,000 for any additional items that come up as we get settled into this building. And then the out years, the $20,000 would be for general repairs and capital maintenance.
Quick question on that. Is the $50,000 for this fiscal year, is that part of the building loan, revolving loan, or is that out of our?
This would come out of the building fund,
okay.
$50,000. And these are, I'll say that these are placeholders.
Right.
I don't anticipate that we're going to spend $50,000, $20,000, but we've never been in a new building before. We've got a few modifications that obviously we'll have to make. It's either to live in a new space, you want to upgrade a few items, or we're not talking big expenditures. So those are placeholders.
Thank you.
Here's just a summary of all of the village's buildings. We have put in the $200,000 for next year as the local share for the consolidated police training facility. And we do put in $10,000 for each year for the senior center. That would only be in the event that we are unable to find a developer or a new owner. The RFP that is currently on the streets, submittals are due February 9th, and staff is hopeful we'll receive some promising submittals.
Can I just ask a question? So when the police training facility was originally discussed, it was $100,000, then I think it went up to $150,000, and now it's at $200,000. Can you just explain why the cost has gone up?
Yeah, I purely just put it towards inflation, labor costs, things of that nature. But again, that we don't know. We're earmarking $200,000, but we don't know what that ultimate number is going to be. That building, I'm still not sure exactly when we're going to be looking at breaking ground for that. The sheriff's department is focusing on our former building, but they have, my understanding is they have contracted with an architect to do both spaces. So I would say the number has moved up, to answer your question, just due to inflation and labor costs.
So are the same departments that were still interested in participating with cost sharing, are those departments still participating?
I'll turn it back here to the chief.
Yeah, so far, it's the Sheriff's Office, and then Algonquin Police Department, Lincoln Hills Police Department, McHenry City Police Department, and Cary Police Departments are those municipalities. And then there's Huntley Police Department that has been part of the discussions, of which we'll have another one the 25th of January to kind of talk about this, training center and concepts and things like that. But yeah, there's a consortium of departments that are still interested.
Okay, because it sounds like you have some new ones, and then some that may have pulled out. Wasn't there, I thought the college was originally?
No, yeah, the McHenry County College is no longer part of it. Woodstock has been part of the discussions, but they're not. Huntley has been. They were at the last meeting we had. There's been a core group, and that core group is Algonquin, Lincoln Hills, McHenry City, and Cary. With the Sheriff's Department. I don't want to miss the Sheriff's Department.
No, yeah, thank you.
So technology, one of the items staff is proposing is expanding our GIS capabilities. This would be a cost split with the water and sanitation fund as well as the capital fund. We've also included data collection to update our GIS information about our sanitation and storm water systems. You'll see we're recommending a new camera system for the Public Works facility, the Metro Depot, as well as installing a new camera down at the wastewater treatment plant. One of the biggest driving forces for this is the age of the system and the quality of the system it currently is, as well as putting it all under one system so then all the cameras would match with the municipal center building. Some of the other projects for next year include the purchase of an agenda management software, the second phase of digitizing those files, for purchasing new mobile data computers for the squad vehicles and a new live scan computer. And then in the out years, staff is recommending replacing the emergency vehicle preemption equipment. This could be a shared cost with the fire district. And then another LED streetlight conversion program is proposed in FY 23-24, and this program would replace the Cobra headlights and would be eligible for a ComEd rebate.
Are we required to have body cams?
Yes.
We are by what year?
2020.
That's been going on in the background. The chief has, deputy chiefs have been researching, looking at various setups and companies, talking to other agencies, and so they've been preparing for that even last year, I think, or even before that, chief, right?
It's true, and we also don't know exactly with the Safety Act what trailer bills are going to occur, because there are some expected modifications to that legislation, because currently right now from any sworn personnel in uniform would have to have a body cam, which would include any administrative personnel. So there's anticipation that there will be a modification to that legislation and it'll be more refined. And to be honest with you, we've looked at some systems that are very expensive. They're very expensive just for our agency, and I know there's some agencies in the county that have had to migrate to this right now. But currently, I'm more willing to we have in-car cameras, and when we do this, we want to update our in-car cameras in concert with our body-worn cameras.
Are those systems that could be leased or do you have private?
Well, there's a component of both. For example, I have some information from Axon, which is Taser. It's a offshoot of Taser, and for this is last year's numbers. I was waiting for this year's numbers, but to do in-car cameras and body cameras right now, just for 1 year, it would be a little over $90,000, and then every subsequent year after that would be about $50,000.
So, I'm sorry if I missed something, but are we now leasing more vehicles than purchasing?
Yes.
And that's for the police cars as well?
Yes.
So when we spec out a new police car, I know we go through that government management system. Can these things be put into it at that time so that when the new car comes out, you have just a set payment for a car that has everything already in it as opposed to adding the stuff after the fact?
There are portions of the car that we outfit when we acquire them, and we're going to talk about that later, by the way. But some of these systems, like the in-car videos, are the systems that we change from car to car.
All right, thank you.
Speaking of fleet,
Yep, so now we'll move into fleet. So the Village of Cary utilizes the leasing program. Many benefits to this, obviously, the biggest one being improved cash flows, which is especially important in a fund that doesn't have a dedicated funding or revenue source. We are expecting by the end of this current fiscal year to be receiving $77,000 from this. That is the sale of the first round of vehicles. I believe it was 7 2020 vehicles. The summer is unusually high due to the current market value of used vehicles. So we don't expect that same amount going forward, but we do expect some sort of return on investment for this.
And as Kelly mentioned, the rate of return on those the equity in this program has been very positive so far, and it was planned that way. But we hopefully will see those numbers continue to move forward as we go further into the program. For next fiscal year, we're going to continue that transition from owning and purchasing our squad vehicles to getting them in the rotation for leasing. So we will have a total of 8 units on the squad side for next fiscal year. So that's an addition of 3. From the 5 we have currently, and then we'll continue to phase in some of the administrative vehicles as well with the light-duty half-ton pickup trucks, and those are primarily driven. That selection is primarily driven, as before, due to the resale value, which continues to be strong and anticipates to remain that way. On the non-leasing side for vehicle improvements, we do propose a couple items for the public works and maintenance side. One is the Scissor Lift, which is for building maintenance, primarily driven by the fact that we have this beautiful new facility. We have a lot of sensors and lights and other things that we just can't reach now with our current equipment. So that'll be a useful tool for us, not just here at this building, but at other places as well. That CCOM is trying to integrate those systems.
Do we pay for all that, or does the fire district or anyone contribute towards it, any other taxing body, or just us?
That's us.
All right, let's jump into commuter parking fund improvements. This graph right here shows the last 5 full fiscal years as well as 6 months into our current fiscal year. As you can obviously see, the pandemic has taken a huge hit on revenues in the parking fund with the amount of people parking or commuting. We think that this could potentially be hopefully not permanent, and we have obviously seen some bounce back in our current fiscal year with revenues, but there's been a shift with the pandemic of how people work, how people commute, and employers shifting to more remote work. Also of note, the expenses then in the parking fund currently are being paid through an interphone loan from the general fund.
And for next fiscal year, the most notable project in that list will be the resurfacing of our north commuter lots. This will be the second phase in the pavement rehabilitation we've been working towards with the completion last year of the south lots. So all the lots you can see shaded in red, green, and blue are the ones that are proposed for next fiscal year. We just had bids come in this week, and luckily they were actually very favorable, and it enables us to accomplish this project with a little bit less resources locally, and also take advantage of the eligibility for lost revenue projects and the American Rescue Plan Act money that we have. So we will be allocating $325,000 of that ARPA money towards this project. And this chart just shows a summary of all the other projects in the parking fund. As Kelly mentioned, there will be a need because of the current revenue streams in the parking areas for the interfund loan transfer in general. We have a few minor projects still slated, along with the North Commuter lots, notably the completion of a few projects that are currently underway right now. The depot building that was demolished this last month. Come springtime, once temperatures are back to a favorable range, we'll get the temporary concrete placed over that area that's now gravel. And then we'll finish off the landscaping at the new depot project now that all the guardrail and signal interconnect work is done alongside the building. Moving on to downtown. We have several projects that we look forward to seeing in some of our previous discussions. One of them that we've been looking at for quite some time and are very excited about is the West Main Street Reconstruction, which includes a very significant streetscape component. This project, we are planning to utilize the Rebuild Illinois Bond Fund money that's provided to all of the state municipalities. Our share of that Rebuild Bond Fund money is about $1.2 million. Originally, when this project was designed, we had that lined up pretty much in tune with the amount of money we had coming in, but obviously with the last couple of years of pandemic pricing increases for commodities and supply chain challenges, that number is estimated to be higher slightly than we had projected originally. So we're looking at about approximately $1.5 million for that project. So we will be looking to utilize another funding source to accomplish the remaining balance, likely in a capital fund. And then the other project in the downtown, the other portion of our improvements is the Depot Plaza development and the Fresco Alley of Festival Street. This is a project that we presented recently at Committee of the Whole, and we're just recently applied for a grant for the Rebuild Downtowns and Main Streets Capital Grant, which is a mouthful. That's just another spin-off of the state's share of the rebuild monies that are going towards some competitive projects throughout the state. So we feel like this one has a very good chance of being awarded to us. And if you recall, it does include the final plaza over the old depot site. If you can advance the slide, please. With some of the elements such as the overhead shade sails, some permanent gates that can be utilized to more decoratively close the road for the season for our Fresco Alley. The streetscaping improvements are also shown in those renderings with the overhead catenary lights, pavers in the parking lanes, all new sidewalks and landscaping, and new signals at High Road and Main Street. And over on the Depot Plaza side, you might recall, we have the new Shade Pavilion, which we've reconfigured slightly since the previous presentations to kind of encompass the whole area for multi-purpose use. We've shifted the bicycle parking outside the shade structure there. New fence between the plaza and the existing platform. We have the high-quality artificial turf to give a little bit of a green space feel to this very urban plaza, and then the natural gas outdoor fireplace feature. And another component of that project between the Fresco Alley area and the Depot Plaza is that intersection of Spring Street and West Main. We would like the board's feedback this morning on one of the facets that we've been looking at as the design progresses. You might recall the original design of the streetscape project had two gateway columns at the beginning and the entrance of West Main Street. As the design evolved, we did transition that a few years ago to more intersection catenary lighting for that area. So at that point, we were thinking that we weren't sure when the streetscape project would occur and that the intersection lighting might be standalone, much like that example you see there on the slide, which is in downtown Crystal Lake, just north of the railroad tracks. Now that we have all these projects kind of coming together and holistically, we want to get your feedback on whether or not you still prefer the gateway column from Jake or the intersection catenary lighting. I bring this up because now that we have the proposed overhead shade sails over on Fresco Alley, we have quite a bit vertical scale to these improvements. We have one might consider too much of a good thing. So I wanted to see everybody's opinions on the ground level perspective. If you still prefer the overhead catenary lighting or maybe just one of the gateway columns in concert with all the other improvements we're proposing.
You can chew on it too. I mean, if you want to get back to us, but any feedback that you have now, we'll take it, or you can circle back on it. But again, just want to get your thoughts on this.
So just for clarifications, you're talking about whether or not you wanted to start before Spring Street or after Spring Street. We're still looking at catenary lighting down High Street, but just where it's going to start.
Yes, because Yeah, the one that would start at where the tracks is and go all the way down past BMO Harris.
I'm personally fine with it starting with the gateway columns and going from there from past Spring Street on, because you're going to have enough other stuff going on. Just my initial thoughts, but I'm open to.
I think it was with the addition to shade sail, it was one thought that maybe there was too much going on there, because the shade sail hasn't always been in the plans. It was one that we added here. Trustee Dudek had brought an example to us from another community, and we kind of, I don't know, copied / utilized that example.
We've emulated that.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't this shade sail, it's got some sort of a lighting element to it? Is there lights associated with it?
There could be. That's detail. I think once we know if we've secured that grant or not, we would kind of develop that a little bit further. Just conceptually, we could envision probably some accent lighting that could be projected upward toward the sail or integrated off the poles just to help illuminate that a bit. But that would be a detail to be determined.
So in the long term, look at this. What's the life expectancy difference between this column lights or catenary lighting and maintenance costs over the life of it?
I would say they're both pretty comparable. The poles obviously are just like some of the other decorative poles we have in town. They're a very substantial material that will last. Obviously the string lighting are things that would be refreshed and renewed, but that's more of a maintenance item than a full-fledged capital replacement. And then column obviously is masonry and stuff like that.
Anybody willing to throw out their thoughts on this? Trustee Belli?
I like the column a lot. And then I just want to add one other thing, the fireplace, I really like it, but it's small. Maybe it's just the picture, but if that could be a little bit more prominent. Because I just think that that's a very nice area to gather around. So, but I really like that column. It's different.
I agree.
Is there any possibility, and I agree with Jim's comments as well, I think it's classy. Is there any possibility in all of this to work with BMO Harris to remove their sign? That sign, there's no need for it from a bank point of view whatsoever. It's not placed in a good area. And when you look at this and you see the nice new column with that kind of right behind it, to me, it detracts from all of the work. And I just wonder if we offered to pay for the removal of it, if they would go along with that.
Does it own or lease that space? Or what's it doing?
They own the property there, so that's one of the challenges.
Because if you look back, because they own like the driveway back to their drive-in, so it's kind of carves out their piece of property there. I mean, if you remember back when I was on the board trustee, we mandated, because it used to be a pole sign, and we asked them to make a monument sign, and they were very accommodating to that. So I don't know what their thought process, we would have to ask them.
I think that they'd probably be not interested in removing it.
I would agree.
Is my initial thought. What I will say though, with the downtown plan that we just recently completed, part of the vision is hopefully to see that site redeveloped at some point. And we've been having a very productive conversation with BMO about, hey, this is our plan. We're not trying to force you out, but this is our plan for the downtown. I do think they've maybe pulled back on some of the improvements that they plan to make just with that in mind. So with that said, I'd say that when that property changes hands, because it will at some point, that will be a conversation that we'll have and work with that developer with that. Because I agree with you, Trustee Dudek. It's out of place. No one knows why that's there because people don't understand that they own property out to Main Street. It just doesn't fit there.
Well, to that end, Jake, then the conversation, if we're going to approach them about removing it, even though we know it's probably a dead-end street, maybe incorporating some cost in remaking it to look more like the column we all proposed. So it looks like it belongs in the new streetscape, if it's going to say.
Absolutely. And those are conversations that we can have since we've been talking with them.
Well, I think that you have a unanimous with the columns there.
Does it light up, by the way, with Cary? Is it backlit, the word Cary?
Yes, the column would be internally illuminated.
Very nice.
It's very classic.
And then if we, I don't want to jinx this, but if we're not successful in that grant for the Fresco alley, obviously we'll revisit this again to see if the desire is still for the column, even without the shade sails or not.
is with all the downtown items too, just one final comment, and we'll be circling back here when the time is appropriate to talk about the funding. There's different options that we can go from, look at if there's funds available in the capital projects fund, our building fund, just, since we've been successful with this project, there's funds that are remaining in the building fund that we're planning to use, whether it's for downtown or it's for that metro site. And so there are some options that we can look at that we'll be communicating with you all on in the future.
Before we leave that street again, Main Street there, with all the work that we're talking about, I'm just going to throw this out as a comment. Over Christmas, I was in Gatlinburg, and their Main Street has the same Christmas decorations all the way down the street. So it's very uniform, it's very organized, it's very attractive. You see that in a lot of communities. When I'm going west on Northwest Highway and I'm stopped at the light and I can look at downtown, I don't see that same sort of uniform approach. I see, some trees are a little higher, some trees are a little lower. The lights, they're pretty, don't get me wrong. It's not criticizing. I'm just saying that I like to throw out here maybe to try to get some pricing on some holiday lighting that would be uniform for the street, where it would look probably more improved over the way it looks today.
Definitely, and one of them you can see from one of our slides, after all these downtown improvements are completed in the plaza, we were proposing about 15 grand or more into some holiday lighting updates. And I think what you're
Part of it too, I think, is the we'll be through the downtown redevelopment, the streetscape. We'll be taking down some trees and adding trees, so they'll be more uniform.
Okay.
Because some of them need to come down, some of them aren't.
Yeah.
So that's part of it as well.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And the overhead view here for the West Main Street improvements, everywhere where the catenary lighting is located, because of the spacing that we have to achieve with that design, all the parkway trees in that corridor have to be removed and replaced with new trees. So we actually will be starting fresh with uniform tree species and more approximately the same sizing as well. Actually, it's good timing. I think one of the trees, one of the bigger trees on that corridor is dying or is about to be removed. So it's sad that we have to remove trees, but it's going to have a good...
But we're replacing trees. It's not like we're removing them, we're just adding more.
Precisely. So this slide just shows a good overall summary of all the projects we just mentioned. And as you can see, if we're successful with the downtown grant and combined with the Rebuild Illinois Bond Fund money we already have for this project, we're looking to do about $4 million of total downtown improvements, but only spend about a third of that locally.
When will you find out about the grant?
I believe sometime this summer is their rough timeline. And then beyond those main projects, all the more ancillary items that we're going to refresh for downtown. Many of our banners need to be replaced, so we're going to phase a couple years of replacing those, which will also be more in line with the updated branding and style that we're looking for with the other projects. The holiday lighting we mentioned, that will be done after the completion of these other downtown improvements. Just because of some scheduling and other priorities, we are having to complete this extension of some power, bringing that to some of the parkway trees to the west of High Road on Main Street. That's an in-house project that will continue into next fiscal year. And then just down the road, just keeping it as a placeholder for a potential option, the bike sharing technologies and stations are becoming more popular and prominent. And with our updated downtown, some of the destinations around the village, there could be an opportunity to do a partnership with the county in that. And then lastly, kind of rolling from the previous committee discussion this week, just throwing out there that there is that Maplewood Access Road intersection improvements just as a future project, depending on where the development goes with that.
So we'll go into a discussion about road infrastructure and capital maintenance. So here is just a map that shows you the proposed projects for next fiscal year. We've talked about a few already with the North Commuter lot resurfacing, the West Main Street project. We have a few stormwater improvement projects in here, water and sanitation projects, the Oslad Rotary Park project, and then the First Street Phase 2 design. So for the First Street corridor improvements, we are finishing up phase 1 this fiscal year with the project being submitted to IDOT for review. Phase 2 would begin next year, and staff would submit an application for STP funding. Based on the current STP funding schedule, the project would likely occur in fiscal year 26-27. If the village was to receive the STP funding, we'd pay a local share for construction and construction engineering, about 20%. So we would plan to budget for $334,600 in upfront costs. This has the plan view that was shown at the public meeting in December, and it doesn't include those on-street bike lanes. Here's a slide that depicts what municipalities can use MFT funding for. The village began paying for salt in 2019 from the MFT fund. This year, we are recommending moving salt back to the general fund in an effort to open up more dollars for the village's road programs. Here's just some images that depict the examples of roads and their PCI rating. Currently, 77% of the village's roads are fair or above, so the top 3. Our overall PCI average is 71.7, which is satisfactory, with 23% of the roads in poor or worse condition. The map here is based on a survey that was completed in June of 2021. This slide may look familiar from a previous committee of the whole discussion. We've updated the scenarios to include those additional funds that were originally intended for road salt. So in both scenario 1A, which is an every other year program, and scenario 1B, which is an every year program, the network would fall to poor by 2032. Previously, when salt was being paid for out of MFT, we were estimating that the PCI score would fall to poor by 2030. So it's extended about 2 years. Here's just a map that shows you what scenario 1A would look like. It's the every other year program. And scenario 1B, which is an every year program.
And with that program, we're also making a concerted effort to not only kind of hit the worst first in terms of the roads that need the resurfacing, but also ensuring that we try to group these roadways in a logical manner, because that helps with the efficiency of the work by the contractor, to get better unit costs, but also the disruption to the neighborhood, so that we're not coming into one subdivision 4 times over the next 6 years.
So Eric, in general, in this part of the country, is it the salt that really deteriorates the roads? Is it the, freezing, unfreezing? What exactly is it that deteriorates our roads so quickly?
Well, there's a lot of factors. I think you've hit a couple of the main ones. The freeze-thaw impacts for when the cracks do form just over time. Once that moisture gets in there, it tends to cause havoc. And then as ice forms and expands and cracks the pavements, vehicle loading is the other big issue. A lot of the pavements obviously are designed for longevity, but you can only put so much asphalt down per square foot before it becomes less cost effective. But even the smallest residential streets that don't carry a lot of traffic, like in terms of total vehicles per day, are all going to have school buses. They're all going to have garbage trucks, and those are probably the biggest culprits. The fact that the heavy refuse haulers, they got to travel along the curb line to pick up the cans, and so you're getting a lot of loading on the edges of the pavements, and that's probably one of the biggest factors we see. And then it's over time oxidation, that is the natural effect that's going to have on the pavement.
So the liquid, the beet juice stuff that a lot of places, I'm not sure, are we using that now? Is there any benefit to going that route, or it might be more expensive than salt, but it's not as tough on the pavement, and the cost benefit longer term is worthwhile?
No, we utilize some of the liquid products depending on the type of storm events. But I would say that the salt use itself isn't going to be kind of one of the main driving factors that's going to reduce the longevity of our pavement. I think it's more of the loading and the freeze-thaw factors.
Thanks.
Here's just a summary slide of the MFT fund. With this slide, it does show an every year program. One of the projects that we've also included in fiscal year 26 is the design of the traffic signal modernization at Georgetown Drive and Three Oaks. The construction of this project would be a future unfunded.
And of note, in my last slide, you'll notice one of the projects that we have designed and shovel ready, but has been kind of sitting in our future unfunded status, is the illuminated street name signs and signal painting for all the signals on Route 14. Just given the amount of resurfacing and work that we feel we need to do, that is one of the projects I think would look spectacular in town and kind of help improve the look of all the signals and improve the wayfinding in terms of what streets are there. But it is, in terms of rating that compared to our pavement needs, we put that off in the unfunded status for now. Unless the board has a desire to move that, rearrange that around. That's where we have it currently.
Come on, I've been asking for this since 2009. Rick looks at me.
I still remember the conversation. Believe me, I did.
We're getting there.
We're getting there.
The other thing, too, I just want to point out is the road salt, we're looking to move that back in the general fund, free of dollars for MFT. We're optimistic about that just based on how revenues are trending here, the sales tax numbers, income tax numbers, that could have to move back, but our goal is the general fund. And then finally, I just say before we leave MFT is we're still waiting on some data from the state to have that follow-up conversation with the board about potential funding options. I know that we were looking at how many vehicles are waiting for that data, how many vehicles are in Cary to understand if we decided to talk about a vehicle sticker, how much would we be talking about per vehicle sticker? I know it's not popular at all, but we want to bring back that data.
Where's my gavel?
So you can make an informed decision. That's why we took it away from you today. So that we're still waiting on that data. So I just want the board to know that that conversation will happen.
Hey, Jake, longer term with the hospital going up on 31, I mean, Three Oaks already going east, it is pretty heavy at times of the day. I'm not so sure how it is going west. I don't experience that as much as seeing traffic coming towards Northwest Highway. It's not going to get any better. What kind of plans are there for that?
Reading your mind, we've got some slides here.
Yep. Be patient.
I'm not a patient.
A quick thing. Do you guys permit overweight trucks? Check up unloading and unloading on
Yes, we do. We use Oxcart as our permit software. We don't get a lot of them because a lot of the travel is on state routes.
And through, with regards to 31 and Three Oaks intersection, that through my role through COG, we've identified that as a strategic need in the future for potential funding through the legislature. So it's been identified, especially through the corridor now we have, and with the expansion hopefully on Route 31 going further south. So it's on our list now.
For roadway maintenance, staff is recommending an increase to a few of the programs, one of them being the asphalt patching to around $135,000, sidewalk curb repairs to $75,000, and then also including a tree trimming service, which has not previously been paid for in capital. This would allow, one, to help with the backlog of tree trimming, but also the contractor would be utilized for those trees that our staff cannot safely reach with our current equipment. These items, trees, sidewalks, and potholes, are the primary complaints that Public Works receives. Also, one thing to note, so this fiscal year, we had budgeted $18,000 in the general fund for catch basin repair services. We are recommending moving that to capital next year. So we put it $20,000 there for you to see. And then we've also recommended a second wave of Route 14 sidewalk repairs. We did complete that first wave this year.
We're hoping the catch basin repair pricing is more favorable this next fiscal year. We had hoped to do a contractor hit a number of locations this fiscal year, but again, with the labor shortages, commodities, and so forth, the bid prices were significantly out of budget, so we ended up just taking care of the most urgent structure that was in that list in-house, but we'll hopefully get better contractor pricing next year.
Here's the sidewalk maintenance program map. These are all locations identified either by resident complaints or the in-house staff inspections. We have seen a decrease in the number of high and moderate locations after this year's program. Part of that was keeping those US Route 14 sidewalk repairs outside of our usual program. If we were to replace all of the high and moderates, it would be around $180,000. Locations that are low or watches can either be repaired using our sidewalk cutting program or can be ground in-house with our equipment. Here's just an example of the asphalt patching program we could complete next year. The $135,000 could address multiple roads that we've identified in some serious need of patching.
And that's a good example of the impacts that the heavy garbage trucks are causing. You see a lot of those patching areas that we have identified. The middle of the road is in modest shape or decent shape, but that edge, you see significant alligator cracking, and in some cases that bottom left over on Candlewood Trail, significant heaving. All right, moving on to community signage. This map here shows a broad list of all the different types of signs that we are proposing in our 5-year program, as well as the locations. So the first one is one that we've identified in the long range in previous CIPs, but we're hoping to move upward now that we have some newer developments in town that are in need of some wayfinding. So this would help give us some directional assistance to motorists coming into town off the main arterials to find some of our more popular destinations, things like Rotary Park, the new Municipal Center, since we're in a different spot than before, and the new Aquatic Center that the Park District is going to be opening up later this year. This project would be have some flexibility. We could bid it all at one time. It'd probably be coming in that $120,000 range, $130,000 range, or we can split it up into 2 fiscal years. This one is another that the board has seen before. We are moving forward and getting the final design completed and bid documents prepared and the IDOT permits secured for the new entry signs. The ones along Route 14 are the ones that require the IDOT permit approvals. So IDOT has it in hand, and we're hoping to get comments back from them in the next 3 to 4 weeks. That project will hopefully be ready for going out to bid this summer and construction summer, fall of this year. Pricing is a bit higher than our original estimates from a couple years ago, again, due to the recent changes in inflation and commodities pricing. Here's another item that we'd like some feedback from the board on. The third category of community signage are these subdivision signs. Many of the subdivisions in town have signage that is actually maintained by local homeowners associations. However, some of the neighborhoods, just the way that they were brought into the village at the time, the signs are owned and maintained by the village. So there are 11 of those currently in our list. And of those 11, 7 are kind of a more standard basic wood design. Those are the ones that I'm kind of focusing on right now because those require the most maintenance and attention. You can see the photo probably doesn't really do it justice, but some of the ones are in need of some significant love and attention at this point. So we'd like your feedback on whether or not you want us to continue moving forward with trying to rehabilitate and maintain the signs as is. We will note that talking to some of the sign contractors out there, the type of wood utilized for these signs is not your standard treated lumber you'd get at the home improvement centers. It is a more specialized product just to make sure it lasts a lot longer. That material is getting harder and harder to come by these days, so we are hearing that the pricing on that just repair as is might be escalating significantly in the near future. The option we were throwing out there as one possibility to get around that is to replace those wood signs as they are in need of replacement with a standard decorative metal pole sign, very much in line with the style of that type B sign you saw for the entry signs. But instead of just saying Village of Cary, you could highlight the name of the division. There's probably other options as well, but that's just a placeholder to show what could be done at a cost of about $8,000 per sign.
It's very attractive. That option should be
we talk a lot about continuity in the downtown and all these other areas. There's a perfect opportunity to extend that continuity all the way across the village. Not saying they all need to be identical, but to your point, if they're in the same style, we can take care of the ones we own and then encourage the ones that the associations we don't own, when it does come to that useful life cycle for their signs, to move towards something that works with the design that we're hopefully going to have all over the village.
I agree with that. Me as well. And then could we even write something into our code that would compel them to follow just exactly what Trustee Wallace said?
So they have to go for approval if they change their sign up? But the homeowner association doing it?
And those are things that we can certainly look at and put it into the code. I imagine if the HOA was changing out the sign, they'd probably have to get some kind of approval on that. Not where every sign in town that isn't done without a permit. So, yeah.
That one looks like a gravestone.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it's probably familiar to you.
Yeah.
Somebody named Fox?
Can we go back to the prior slide for a second here? So, Mark, for sure, remember I said this on several occasions. Kim, we might have said it together when I said this too. Where we have our entrance sign, especially the one where you're coming in from the east, it's one of the least attractive properties that's right there. Is that the only, I mean, we're going to spend, as you see over there, quite a bit of money for an entryway sign that is adjacent to a property that looks terrible. And I just think that, I know we don't have any control over it, or very, very little, and it's not changed a tick since I've been here over 20 years. I hate putting a really pretty sign next to that location. Do we have an option?
We did actually investigate with our consultants through the permitting process along 14 what other locations could be utilized. I think we kind of landed on 3 or 4 spots that at least had potential. Each of them had drawbacks, but all of them had the biggest concern would be the cost and the land acquisition that would be required, whether it be through permanent easement or acquiring the property. And the other factor also would be the visibility and sight lines. I think the spots that we would naturally associate would be a better location. Also had some challenges with blocking the sight lines for the adjacent driveways or roadway.
Also, too, you may recall that we received, these are being paid for by donations by the Glenacki family. So we're really not paying for them. They're particular about the ones that are on 14. They like where they are.
Right next to that house.
Well, we're kind of working, we've talked about this before, about really expanding what our boundaries look like. By pushing that in more, it's going to look like our boundaries are even a little bit more.
I understand, yeah.
So, we've actually gone out to add some on Route 31 now, you can see on here too, just so people realize when they're coming on 31, okay, this is Cary. You're driving on Route 31 right now, you have no idea you're entering Cary, none whatsoever. So these are ways that we could really incorporate our vast, I'll use that word lightly, our boundaries can be. And I think this is I have always thought it's a code thing, I think, with the home that you're talking about. And we've worked with this homeowner before. I think we just press it a little bit more. They've got some issues there, and they have cleaned up their act a little bit. They got rid of half the cars that were in there before. We were really pressing them to do that. And Dave Wall has done a really good job working with these, because it's a rental. It's not, the owner doesn't obviously live there, so it's a control thing there. And I totally see where you're coming from, and I think we'll just continue to work through code to make sure that these, because I think that although there's a little bit of gravel on their property, that's considered a drive. Am I right? That's how they're getting away with some of this stuff. So, there are other ways that we can, as a board, force their hand at different things as well. Because I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's an eyesore.
Well, and again, it's an aside, but something to keep in mind that we've had some recent conversations about signage in front windows and businesses. And I just think that if you have rules and regulations and you're not actively enforcing them, then things slip by the cracks. And this is an example of that. So, if we're going to make that investment, which, we will at some point in time, I think we have to enforce the codes that we have so that over time, that beautification can take place to whatever degree it will.
And I agree. I think it's, we've got to hold the people accountable. I mean, it's, but we remember we only have a part-time code enforcement officer. So we used to have a full-time, but we just don't afford, we can't afford that right now. So, that's something if you want to look at. Jake is,
Let's keep that in mind when we get to the operational budget and start talking about what payroll numbers actually mean. This is an aside to that as well. That's a perfect example of we want certain things to be executed certain ways. Well, you have to put money in so that you can get money out.
Yeah.
I agree.
I just say too, to finalize your comment, is I know the mayor and I agree with what you stated about the sign is at the best location. We went out and looked at, could we, like Director Mormona said, could we squeeze it into where the Arlington Club is, where that fence is, and work with them. We looked at moving it up even to Ebert. Eric had looked at that on that property that the village owns at Ebert Drive right before you get to Lake Julian. I think we even talked about up by where CDS is, where we have that lift station that's going to be decommissioned. And there were warts on all those options. And we came back to this as being the best, just as Eric mentioned, some encumbrances with other sites. So point well taken. And it's the best. It may not be the most popular, but we think that's the best location for this.
Can I just ask one more question since you have not signed the billboards? What's the lifespan of those things? Because I think when we originally discussed some of the put the new facade on, I don't think it's quite what we expected.
Right. And they're aware of that. I've talked to the owner, and they're aware of they're going to be kind of sprucing them up a little bit. But we do not have a sunset clause on those anymore.
Okay. But again, just...
Well, if you recall, we eliminated a majority of those. They cut them down here. I mean, back in the day when we first moved out here in 92, Route 14 was littered with billboards all the way up through like Jewel, all along the train tracks. It was all the way through town. It was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
It would just be nice to add some consistency to those too. Again, I think the drawings, the mock-ups we were originally shown, I was expecting something different.
The material is certainly not what we're expecting.
Yeah.
Exactly, and they're aware of that.
Okay.
Any other comments on the pole sign?
I agree with replacing it for the continuity when we get to that point. I just think the long-term maintenance, it's much more cost-effective to maintain them. It might be a little bit more up front, but I just think the continuity and the maintenance is there's going to be a return on the investment to do it that way as they come on. So I agree with that.
Again, any other comments that you have outside of this meeting, feel free to give me a call.
I do. I'm like maybe that one person who likes some of the older stuff. I just think about like the Pines of Cary, the person who lives there. They do such a great job of like with their landscaping there, like maintaining it with flowers and things like that. I didn't see that sign up here, but there's some of them that, in my opinion, do look really nice. And then there's some that don't look really nice.
But they can still maintain it. Jennifer, just having a sign there doesn't mean that they can't maintain the whole area the same way. I think it's just more a matter of if we're investing in long term, if we're paying for it. I'm just trying to come up with what is the long term.
I guess I'm also wondering, like, is it going to be like, will some of them be lower? Will some of them be higher? So they fit in. I mean, are there different options?
Well, I think that some of the subdivisions that maintain their sign, I think we'll leave those alone. There are several in the community that they maintain them very nicely. And then there's some like this that, that need some work. But I think that, what do you have?
This one needs some love.
It does need some love.
Well, that one does.
Needs some love.
That example's
And I think we're focusing on a few of those softball ones to help out. So.
And we're focusing here on the ones that we actually own and maintain. Like you mentioned, some of them look a lot better with the landscaping, and those are HOA maintained, and whether it's a resident or their association that does that additional landscaping. Just because we have so many limited time and resources, we tend to go with the kind of low maintenance landscaping approach. Now, granted, there are ways to do that without annuals and flowers that require a lot more attention and time. But the pole signs also give us that opportunity to where if there is limited other landscaping and vegetation and flowers around it, they still have an attractive look to them. But to your point, Trustee Whitehammer, yeah, when we get the actual design done, we'll want to go for a consistent look, like we had mentioned. I think it sounds like is the consensus, but they don't have to be exactly the same. There could be some variations, and whether it's height or some other elements, as long as they have the same themes and feel to the brand that we're looking for. I think that could be possible.
Okay, thank you.
All right, some more new ideas for consideration. These are I'm looking at them as two projects, but they're really three separate projects that are in our unfunded future project list. But with the next call for projects in the Illinois Transportation Enhancement Program, or ITEP, we think that these projects would have a good possibility of scoring well for that funding. So the first one to consider is the Industrial Drive Sidewalk, and then I lumped with that the extension of the existing Cary Algonquin Road Trail. So as you might recall, along Cary Algonquin Road, once you get to go northbound to Main Street, it turned into a sidewalk on the west side of the street until you get to Industrial Drive, and then that becomes a exceptionally wide sidewalk as you go under the underpass and across the street, or it then resumes into a trail over at, the name's escaping me, the Partnership Park with the pond up there. JC Park, thank you. And then obviously, as many of us are probably more aware now that we've moved to the new municipal center here on Georgetown Drive, Industrial Drive has no sidewalk through the industrial park, so it does end over the detention pond on the west side. And then as I mentioned, there's an existing sidewalk and trail on the east side over at Cary Algonquin. We're proposing to add that new sidewalk on the south side of the roadway, just a general rendering on the upper right there of that image, and then widening the existing sidewalk to the same cross-section of the trail. It'll also help in our scoring that the CMAP Fox River Corridor Plan did show that this corridor along Cary Algonquin is one of their priority corridors for bike and pedestrian facilities.
I think that this should be a priority for us. I mean, just with us going back and forth now on Industrial Drive, there is a substantial amount of pedestrian traffic on there. And, with the trucks that are in and out of there, we have a safety issue there that really should be remedied sooner than later. And we've noticed this a lot more since we were here. And yeah, people like to walk to Village Hall. We've had walkers in the past, so we've got to give them a safe way to get here.
I just think too, going with the potential grant is always let's be honest, let's give some accolades. We have staff here that does a great job with getting grants. So, absolutely, I think tying into CMAP is the key. There's money that was going into that, and I think that's going to give you a lot of points. So,
and combined, these two elements here are approximately a $640,000 project. So with an ITEP grant maybe giving us 80% of the costs, there still would be that local share of $120,000 or so. My math is correct, that we'd have to find in our capital plan. So that is not currently listed in our 5-year CIP, obviously pending a grant here. The other project that would also score strongly to the tune of about $800,000 is the addition of a new bike path along the side of South Rawson Bridge Road. Just like the other project we just mentioned, this is also identified as a priority corridor in that same CMAP study. And it continues the existing trail that we just lengthened with the Three Oaks Road project a few years ago that currently ends at South Rawson Bridge. And then we carry it up to our northern corporate limits over at Hickory Nut Grove Road. Yeah. This would require us to do some coordination with Algonquin Township Road District, as our boundaries do kind of sawtooth in and out between their jurisdiction and ours throughout this whole corridor. And then obviously it is entirely in the township road district's jurisdiction once you get north of our limits as you go up to Rawson Bridge Road and across the river.
It's another good one.
Yeah.
That'd be beneficial to the potential project looking in that area. I think that would help some with that.
Which project are you referring to?
The residential development, I think you're referring to up on River Bend.
yes, the old Riverbend property.
Yeah, the River Bend property.
Yes, it would support that new development, redevelopment. We have the driving range and the existing park district, Foxford Hills Golf Course, and then that the wonderful park up there that the Conservation District has in Felbrook. There's a lot of good continuity in terms of getting people on their bicycles or walking to those amenities that we currently have already.
And then snow removal, you guys would maintain this for snow removal as well?
Yeah, as we add new trails, that's with our annual discussion for our program. That would be something we'd have to look at and see if it was the decision of the board to add that to the list.
I drive that road every single day, and there are a lot of people jogging and people walking their dogs. And so it's really unsafe with where it kind of goes up and down. Sometimes you have to go around garbage trucks and stuff like that. And then there's the people on the streets and stuff. So it would just be so nice for.
I mentioned this to the highway commissioner, and she's aware of it, and she would be more than willing to discuss it.
Well,
She
it'd
could
be
commit,
a
but-
joint venture with them
Pardon
or
me?
something. Maybe in a joint venture with them, you could
Well,
joint project.
Director Remover said that there has to be some sort of continuity to it.
Right.
And that cost estimate would be for our portion project, not including the costs we have to plan for as well. So with that, I think it would be best if we applied for, if we're going to consider the ITAP funding, that we applied for just one of the two suggestions here. Is there any feedback you have on which one you prefer? We'd love to hear it.
So we can't have both, is what you're telling us? Because you can't be doing that, man. You can't offer us both and take one away.
And again, just looking for any initial comments that you have, we'll certainly circle back with the board on these.
Where is there more pedestrian traffic right now? Where's this highest safety issue?
I think you could get a
It's almost where you're going to have to flip a coin.
It'd be a toss-up.
I would suggest that there is, to the mayor's point, there is an opportunity to walk to the municipal center, just not that direction. So you can access very safely all and so on. So there is a potential there. On the other project, if you're about the clubhouse of Foxford Hills or any cemetery or any of that, there's really no other option up and down south of Ross and Bridge Road.
I agree.
Yeah, I would say you prioritize that based upon safety issues. If you have to pick one, that's just my initial thought.
I would do first. It's public safeties.
Anybody else have you could talk, I mean, no decision needs to be made today, but if there's a unanimous decision, let's go with that. One less thing we have to worry about, but absolutely think about it if you want and what you think would be best, and we'll take that all into consideration.
So as far as the proposed trail, I guess it'd be north of West Main on Cary Algonquin, does that only come with the industrial drive? Because the sidewalk over there is pretty uneven. It gets really small.
Which one? Can you remind me where you? This slide,
Industrial drive.
are you talking
So
about?
Industrial drive up to Cimarron, because it's a regular sidewalk, and it makes it a fun
Correct. It
jog.
goes from a path to like a sidewalk to like a sidewalk.
Yes, that's the area, the dashed yellow line.
Yes.
That's part of the trail expansion. So yeah, we would replace that oddly configured sidewalk with an 8-foot wide asphalt.
So that's only with the industrial drive one, or could you do at least that bit with the Ross and Bridge Trail? Or is it just either or? You know what I mean? Like,
Just that little
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
section.
It
Right.
becomes,
Because to me, it's like there are definitely some even parts to the sidewalk, so it would still get, because at least then there's a path to like 14, so it's more consistent.
we could program that in terms of like us bidding a project like that together, but in terms of the grant perspective, the
Okay.
projects have to have logical termini. And
Gotcha, okay.
that would be, they would look at that as two separate projects.
Okay, then I would think that the Ross and Bridge Trail one, because of the safety aspect, would probably be more of a priority than the other one.
Agreed? Okay, I think you got a unanimous for Russell Bridge.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Trustee Dudek beat me to the punch on this one.
Wasn't planned.
Great minds think alike, I like this thing. 3 Oaks Road at US Route 14 intersection. So this is one that obviously has been in the radar for a lot of us for some time, but we do feel like it does need to be put more prominently in our CIP. It is still going to be listed in our future unfunded section of our program, but I think, like Mayor Connick mentioned, I think the more attention it gets in terms of regional planning and putting in a priority with the other planning organizations like McHenry County Council of Governments and others. Hopefully be able to get some assistance for the future project like this. This one is also a prime candidate for Surface Transportation Program funding, or STP, for future development projects. And given that US Route 14 is a Illinois DOT jurisdiction roadway, Three Oaks Road being our local jurisdiction, I'm hopeful that if we were able to get maybe long-term federal funding for the project, that IDOT would work with us and support the local match. It's a larger project, at least from our perspective locally, so that local match is still pretty significant, but I think it's something that we definitely should try to look for and plan for the future on. Tentatively, that project at a very high level of cost, not knowing where dollars are going to fall for pricing these projects in the long-term future, it's nearly a $5 million project. Most of that cost is because of the fact that you not only have some intersection widening to add likely, not for certain, but the likely configuration of dual left turn lanes on Route 14 for going east and westbound. And then from eastbound Three Oaks Road, adding a separate right turn lane. You have to not only do the roadway, you have to acquire property land acquisition at the intersection, and then you have to do railroad crossing and railroad signal modifications. And that's some of the more challenging aspects to what is, from IDOT's perspective, probably a very simple intersection project. But let's just, like I mentioned, I think it's something we should keep in mind for the future, and hopefully stars will align and we'll get that plan for the future.
Yeah, I'll keep pushing it through McCog.
Yeah. Who owns the rest of Three Oaks Road, west of that intersection?
Well, we own it up like right past Stryker.
Right. Who owns the
Then
rest
it's
of it?
township.
Then it's township,
for a
and then
couple
it comes to
hundred
village,
Yep.
or the
It's
Crystal Lake.
Is there any plans for expanding that road?
No, and part of, I misspoke if I was throwing, because we're thinking about all these different projects, because we're also looking to get funding for Route 31 in Three Oaks because of the hospital. But we're talking about, because of the new hospital that's over there, we're going to want to improve this intersection for easier access to the hospital, because in our area, the new hospital, I believe that they'll just be going to the new hospital that's over here, rather than going all the way across the river and to grandmother's house. We go.
But you don't know if there's any plans to make the road wider?
They are.
Is it long-term
Crystal Lake has talked about it. We haven't been together with Crystal Lake because they're normally at meetings with us. They haven't been there and we talk about this, so I don't know exactly where it is on their CIP program and that stuff. So I'll be with them on Wednesday. I could ask again as well. But these two intersections on Three Oaks, I just want to make sure that they have been identified as they need to be redone. And we'll look through state funding to help us with that.
And it's our understanding that with the talk about Three Oaks and 31, Crystal Lake actually does have the intersection of Sands Road and Three Oaks Road in their CIP with the latest update to our, a lot of acronyms here, so I apologize, the TIP, or the Transportation Improvement Program, through the McHenry County Council of Mayors. So that's the group that helps manage and oversees the dispersion of the federal STP funding. The Sands Three Oaks Road project was added into the Transportation Improvement Plan or Program for engineering. So that's in the works with some federal assistance for the design of that intersection at least. Construction's still not determined from what I understand.
I know it's not in Cary, but do you know what's going on with that corner there at Sands and Three Oaks? Like, I know that it's what is being built there, I guess, or what's
So yeah, that's the one I just mentioned. It's now engineering looks like it's going to have some federal funding assistance to get the plan started. Their tentative vision for that intersection would be a roundabout.
Oh, you're talking about in 14 in Sands.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, 14.
In my head, I was thinking 14.
Yeah.
That's what you guys are talking about.
Three Oaks Road and Sands was a roundabout. 14 in Sands, I don't believe I've heard any
Casey
proposals for it.
Casey's General Store.
Is it?
The development, gas station, yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But the signal that's there presently, I haven't heard about any changes to it. So.
Trying to think of where Three Oaks and Sands, I was just past.
It's a nightmare.
Hotel is.
Yes, you go to Walmart.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they changed it to the
Okay.
So yeah, just to clarify, so on the screen above, you'll see Route 31 on the left, Three Oaks Road in the middle. Sands Road is the first intersection east of the signal at 31 and Three Oaks. So it's currently
I know where you're talking about.
no traffic control off the Trails Road, you don't stop, but the Sands Road, and actually it's Lutter Drive on the south side of that intersection, is stop control. So that is proposed conceptually as a roundabout.
Interesting.
I would think it just possible to add a track or something.
Well, we already know that 3 Oaks and 31 is a failing intersection in the state there.
Very dangerous intersection.
Yeah.
So
Well, and with Walmart there, people coming out of there, and then you go up the hill, and then you got Sands Road. It's a little
It's a nightmare.
cumbersome.
It's
Yes,
dicey.
I agree.
Welcome to Cary.
Welcome to Cary Crystal Lake intersection.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is another future unfunded project that we reviewed, and just would like your feedback if it's something that they would desire to move it up into the plan. So if you're, I don't have a location map here, so I apologize, but this is the Crystal Lake Road pedestrian crossing at the western entrance to the Conservation District, Felbro, Chapulhar. That was a mouthful. But so the existing intersection, Crystal Lake Road, has no stop control, and then the cross street opposite that parking lot for the Conservation District Park is Foxford Drive, the western intersection of Foxford Drive and Crystal Lake Road. So one way to accommodate the pedestrian route from the subdivision to the south and from that trail that exists along Crystal Lake Road on the south would be to add a new crosswalk. So we won't be making a four-way stop because I don't believe that would be warranted from the traffic perspective. But a new crosswalk that block with the rectangular rapid flashing beacon for the pedestrian warning beacon. But to do that would require obviously a little bit of a sidewalk extension on the south to get to the new crosswalk. And then we would want, it'd be important to then take that pedestrian movement and then extend the sidewalk and match it to the existing walkways inside the parking lot at the Conservation District. So it would require some coordination with that agency as well, since we'd be going off right away and into their park. But this would be, we believe, a positive pedestrian safety improvement, and maybe encourage more people to not drive to the park, but walk or bike there. So that comes at a cost of approximately $50,000 for engineering and construction.
So that park is a conservation district.
Yeah, there's two entrances to that. There's the up top here, which creates, you can see the walking trail up there. And then down below is where you have the disc golf course and et cetera.
I mean, I think that is one of the most underutilized parks that I'm aware of. I mean, I go there all the time. I think it's beautiful, and it doesn't get, you know, if it was Cary, I'd push the heck out of it because it's such a nice facility. And I think anything you can do to kind of bring it to people's attention at that kind of cost is well worth it.
Well, this one and the next one along the side are both very personal to me, not only my neighborhood, but the kids that are in Foxford Hills do not get bus service. So there are kids everywhere, all over Foxford Hill before and after school. The school actually, the Deer Path utilizes, they have a running club and some other things that utilize this area we're looking at. And they're crossing the street after school in groups to go do other things. Girl Scout troops, my girls have gone in there for things, and the parking there is ample, but when everybody is doing what we want them, encourage them to do, walking and biking, there's no way to get across Crystal Lake Road, either at Wentworth Circle or either side of Foxford, without just, running your kids across the street. So it really is, a lot of folks would utilize both of these improvements.
I agree.
Actually, we
I
do
think
show.
it's great to have a light up beacon too, especially with winter and it getting dark so early. Just me driving that street every day, I see exactly what you're talking about when people and their dogs train across and get through there. And it's very hard to see people in that spot when it is starting to get dark.
Correct. Right here, coming up the hill.
Yeah.
Actually, on our next slide, before we get more feedback, the other entrance that we just were discussing. So this is the same Crystal Lake Road, but the eastern entrance to that same park. And then we're also showing, obviously, the next intersection over is Wentworth Circle. So there's two ways to kind of attack this challenge here. The first one would at least give a connection from the neighborhood to the north over to the park, because right now there's no sidewalk or trail on the north side of Crystal Lake Road. So currently, if you're on that north side, you have to either just walk along the grass or the shoulder, or go across the road without any crosswalk to the trail, and then do the same thing, cross the same road again without a crosswalk. But that new path itself could be done at about $85,000 with engineering and construction. Or option B, the more traditional approach, establish kind of the same concept as the other park entrance, 2 new mid-block crosswalks with the warning beacons, and then kind of further in the mix another sub-option to that. Instead of a crosswalk over at Wentworth Circle, we could take advantage of the existing underpass that the Park District already has underneath the roadway. That's for the golf course, but it actually is connected to the public sidewalk network right at Wentworth Circle. So the only way to make that work would be to establish, you can see in the dark gray there, a new path from the other side of the underpass back to the existing trail on Crystal Lake Road. We still need a crosswalk over at the park entrance, but there's 2 ways to handle that. They're both about the same price, about $50,000 to $60,000 for option B.
So Wentworth is the entrance to Foxford Hills?
Wentworth is there's one area down there called the Reserve that's 68 homes, some of that neighborhood, just circles around and comes back out. So that's when you look at the overall map of Cary, you see the very top right corner of the golf course. So it's up in that northeast corner.
Like a big.
I like the idea of having the road on the north side, or the path rather, I'm sorry.
Option A.
Yeah, option A.
But there's no crosswalk with that one, right?
Yeah, the challenge there, now I would clarify my earlier statements, all the kids in Foxford Hills do not get bused. Wentworth Circle and Kenilworth Court, the 2 streets up there, do get bused. But when it's nice weather and everybody that these kids know are all across the street and they're all walking, and you literally are on the bus longer than it would take you to walk to the school, there's a large portion of the older kids who actually do walk or bike. And to your point exactly, the path is wonderful for those residents to be able to access the lower entrance, but it doesn't get you across the street. And if you remember, you don't see the elevation change. That's the top of the hill, so people are coming uphill and around the corner and absolutely do not see you. And complain about drivers doing 50 miles an hour in a 35 coming up that hill. It is significantly dangerous, and there is the underpass that's already there that the Park District has. So working with them to have access to a new path seems to be a very simple answer to something that's halfway answered already.
So you think B is better?
I think it's a quicker answer. Personally, I would like the lighted crosswalks just for the small kids to be able to get across safer. But it's a very easy answer to say making access to the underground tunnel that's already there. Right now, there's lots of trees and bushes, and it's the golf course, and they don't want you on there. Changing the signage, making it more inviting where folks who are walking can then go underneath, come back up to this new section of trail, and get right back to the trail we all used to go down Crystal Lake Road.
I don't think that it would be beneficial to have a path on the north side. Because I completely see what Trustee Walworth is saying. I go that route all the time, and I'm sure many do. And you do see people jogging, running across the street, and it really isn't safe. There is not even an indication that there's a sign that says Wentworth Circle, but I mean, we need to do something. We have to be proactive about this.
Well, and again, it's very curvy. So you're dealing with a lot of curves right there.
And height too.
Yeah, up and down and curving. And
I like the underneath. If we can somehow utilize that, that's going to be your safest option all day, even with flashing signs. That underneath is definitely your safest option.
So it sounds like B is or some form of B is the preference.
All of 1 and 2, right?
And then with both of these 2 projects we just mentioned, is there a desire to move them into the CIP, or do we want to keep them as the future funded until grants or funding is available?
So how far do you see that as, like, where there could be a potential grant or something like that?
This is a smaller scale project, so I don't see a lot of grant opportunities to score for these. So it might just be a matter of when we want to assign these funding for it.
I would certainly be in favor of moving them.
I say move it in. We can always move it out. But I say let's start and see if we can do it.
See the cost up front.
Yes.
See where we're at.
Greg, could you help me with something? Kim and I are just talking about it. I'm going to plead. I don't know where this underneath the road.
Oh,
that's part of the golf course.
That's part of the golf course.
There's
The
a
golf
tunnel
carts
in
go
the
there to
golf
get
course.
from one end, because there's part of on the golf course where Wentworth Circle is
Right.
4 homes on the golf course there, so
Okay.
you could see it.
There's 5 holes on the other side of Fresco
Yeah.
Lake Road.
Yeah.
And that's how the golf cars and the golfers get from the 10th green to the 11th tee, and then from the 14th
They're going
green
under
to
the
15th.
Three Oaks
They go
Road?
underneath Crystal Lake Road.
On the Crystal Lake Road, okay.
That's why we drew.
Go down there, you'll see now. You probably just never noticed.
I know where the underneath is, goes from the clubhouse to the other side of this Ross up.
I think we need to take Rick golf to get Oxford.
I know a guy.
Too expensive.
You know a guy?
I know a guy.
Let's take us golf.
Yeah.
Now it's getting, hold on a minute.
I say this, Rick.
Yeah.
Okay, we will put both these in the CIPs.
All right, so we're moving away from new projects. However, we do have 3 of the projects that you have seen before that we are proposing to be funded through the American Rescue Plan Act, so our ARPA dollars. It's the Park Avenue flood mitigation, Veterans Park, and then that Krenz Ave, North School Street stormwater improvement. Just a note here that per previous village board discussion, the hazard pay in the amount of $60,000 has also been included as a proposed ARPA funded item for next fiscal year.
And we'll be circling back with the board to talk about these, to finalize these ARPA projects with one of the upcoming meetings.
So here's just a reminder of the Park Avenue project. It includes the stormwater improvements and then also resurfacing of the road. This project was previously designed. It's about $1.2 million. Here's the Veterans Park improvement, which is replacing an outfall that is across Jandis Road and the South Commuter parking lot. Also has already been designed, so that's $110,000 is just for construction. And then the Krenz Ave or North School Street improvement. So this improvement is on School Street, but it does impact the flooding that we see on Krenz. So this is replacing an existing sewer line and installing a new manhole. And it's also already been designed. So those are the 3 projects we're proposing. Those are the ones in green. The ones in black are projects that are in future unfunded. That's about $9.6 million. The 2 that are in red are projects we've previously completed. For example, number 13 is that Spring Street culvert that we replaced. And here's just a table of those unfunded projects.
Does anything on the Krenz project, is anything on the Krenz project impacted by potential Maplewood redevelopment at all?
Yeah, the new retention in the water. Is that where a lot of that water comes from, is the Maplewood property?
No, it's mainly there's a storm sewer that exists there, so this project, it's a bottleneck. So for whatever reason, the sewers go from a 33-inch down to a 12-inch, back up to I'm not sure what the diameter, 24-inch, I believe, on Krenz. So we're just kind of giving consistency in the back of the system so we don't constrict it. But yeah, that's in this School Street right-of-way, so it's not something that would be impacted by the future development.
And then Eric will take back over for the fun Rotary Park project.
Rotary Park, Peter Capon makes another appearance. It's one of the things that's not so much a project, but just a note that we've completed. So with the preparation of our Asphalt grant that is currently under review, we hope to get answers on that in March or so. The master plan was updated, so it just shows and reflects all the improvements that are in our Asphalt application, which again helps for future grant assistance down the road. So that open space, lands, and development grant that we applied for, it was for that fitness and adventure project that has the sensory play garden, the bicycle playground, paving the trail from Hoffman Park down to the parking area, the new pavilion, and as well as the ADA accessible kayak launch, the dock that we just recently constructed.
When will you find out when you got the grant?
In March is what we're hoping here.
Keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
It's a great project.
Oh, yeah.
And then kind of spinning off of that, should the Asphalt grant not be successful, we're not going to jinx it yet, but just in case, Our CIP does still include the park pavilion component of that grant and the paving of the trails. I'll show in a second. This is just the refresher of the latest design from the park pavilion project. So we are currently finishing up the bid documents for that. So once we know the status of that Roadside grant, if we aren't successful, then it'll be ready to go out for bid and then construction later in the year. And if it's with the grant, obviously the engineering, the design will be done and we'll proceed from there with the grant project. And I mentioned the paving and the trails. The Roadside grant essentially covers what's shown in yellow. We labeled there as segment 1, about 1.5 miles of the total trail network. And we would propose in our CIP, if we don't get the grant, that we still may have the opportunity to construct and pave those trails in phases. The first phase being the yellow section labeled about 1.5 miles. And the second phase would be in white on the southern part of the park for about $100,000 to pave the last 0.7 miles to the peninsula. And at that point, we'd have the option, we could pave a future segment to go all the way around, or we could leave that in gravel and maybe wait for some future phases of other development down the road with a master plan. A smaller project in our CIP would be the addition of some park information kiosks at 2 of them by the parking lot, and then a third one at the trailhead adjacent to the entrance to the park from Hoffman Park. This would be for maps and other park information.
Did any of you guys going on the Hoffman Park extension that leads to our lake?
Yes.
It's quite impressive. It's absolutely beautiful.
Is that goes through the dog park?
It's unbelievable. And I have great hopes for, we talk about this, but when we add that trail, ours, I mean, it's quite impressive, and what a unique opportunity we have to complete this. It's quite impressive. The Park District did an outstanding job. They really did.
Another idea we'd like to move in the CIP is the addition of illuminated floating fountain pumps just on the water just near what will be the new pavilion in the parking area. This would be a spin-off of a project that we've got some good partnership with ComEd on, so it's we have budgeted for it, or paying for the addition of a transformer and an extension of power into the park and the parking area. So our latest word on ComEd's schedule is that they hope to get their part of the work done in February, or let's call it winter. And then early spring, Superintendent Kopaz and his team will in-house install the conduit and the rest of the power lines in order to bring the power into the park. So from there, we'd have the opportunity to feed power to the pavilion, and also for amenities like these pumps that we show here.
Would that be going on during the day too? As far as not the illumination, but the actual fountain?
Yes, we have some flexibility in terms of...
I just wasn't sure how that would affect people. I don't kayak, but how would that affect people kayaking or anything like that? They'd still...
It's going to be a good obstacle.
Yeah, I think there's sufficient room to still navigate. And the placement may not be exactly where I kind of show the rendering.
But it makes sense by the pavilion for parties and that kind of thing, especially in an evening. That would be very cool.
I have one question about this parking. The lack of lighting in the parking lot. Have you ever thought about addressing that?
Yeah, and that's with the extension of power, except for solar, which probably wouldn't work too well. Yeah, there's no way to light the parking lots until we get the power. So that could be a future endeavor.
And Eric, when power does come in there, is there any thought about maybe having a couple of those safety stanchions that they have, the blue light kind of things? Because it's a long perimeter around the whole lake, and if you're on that far, north side or whatever, and something happens, it's quite a ways back to the parking lot.
It could be something we could look at. The challenge would be getting power to the remote areas. It's a pretty significant effort just to get the power lines trenched and connected to the parking area from Clawson Road. Extending
solar though?
Yeah, it's solar.
Not so on.
Not certain. I'd have to look at that.
We can look at it.
Yeah. This is a plot.
Another one, the placeholder at this point would be for the potential for a little shed or garage on site that could be dual purpose. It could house equipment that we use to maintain the property, such as maybe a future utility terrain vehicle or UTV that can be utilized by Public Works for park maintenance and by the police department for service calls out of the park. And then also maybe a potential public-private partnership to get a vendor that would maybe look to take advantage of that new dock and kayak launch for non-motorized water sports.
Excuse me, it's not COVID. We've talked about it at the committee before about, I think, this is an opportunity for us for a potential source of revenue and for the residents as well. I would like to see us double the space of that garage so we have a portion of it for our things and then another portion that could be leased out to a vendor that would, be able to rent out some of that stuff. I think that's something that would, if you're going to construct something, that would be the time to do it, just to give us that flexibility. Because we have had somebody approach us about doing something out there. We didn't talk. When did we talk to them? This summer. That there is people that there are opportunities for us to do that. So I think that would really help us utilize the park more.
Well, to that end, I think, and you and I talked about this a year ago or more, I think it'd be a wonderful place to do 4th of July fireworks from. And then you think about having some sort of maybe a spring or a fall fest out there where you could bring vendors in who would pay for, a 10 by 10 spot to sell crafts or what have you. And, it's a gorgeous view of everything there with the water.
Right.
With 31 right there, if you had some signs out that there was a weekend festival, you would draw people just that are driving right by it. I think there are a lot of potential revenue sources there that can be explored that would be cheap, relatively cheap.
I think so. We've talked about it with the Rotary Chief.
The Rotary is actually looking at doing an event out there this year. We'll be meeting with them, I think, actually this coming week, like a beer tasting event. And so there was that event that was held out there last year, and I think there's some further opportunity for, especially where the Rotary's talking, to have a larger event to draw people out there.
I know some people are looking to do some 5Ks, different things like that, some runs there as well, which would be, there's a lot that can be done. But I just think it's got untapped potential, so.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, I would agree with building it a little bit bigger. I think if you make it too small, that's silly to go ahead and have to add on to it. Build it a little bit bigger, you're not going to have a problem filling it.
I didn't have a chance to update the rendering, but the updated price that we show there, about $50,000 for the garage, that's actually for a structure about the size of the one that we had to build for the railroad, one of the train stations. So if you look on Janus Road.
And that was $50,000?
Well, it was not in 2015 dollars, but in today's dollars.
Wow. We can get a bunch of guys there on a weekend.
Exactly. We all could do it, man.
Yeah, so we do it.
The one thing I was going to add is even if we took it a step further, I'd be curious if you had more of a permanent structure where organizations like the Rotary or something else, if they had a refrigerated area for, just for service. Because if you are going to do large festivals, I know that it's helpful to have like an area where they can serve from, like a permanent structure that's covered, that has refrigerated areas and just areas that they can have all their items, and it's not just on a table sitting out in the field. So I don't know if that's something that we can think long term, if that's something possible.
Is the pavilion going to have any electricity?
It's designed to be ready to receive it, so then we would in-house just make the connection and add the wiring for fixtures and things like that.
Okay.
We will,
Good.
too, just as we think about these projects, I believe that at the end of this fiscal year, we'll be around about 800,000 plus or minus within the Land Conservancy Fund. So these are all great, but I always have my eyes on that of, there's no funding source within the Land Conservancy Fund, and we just want to be cautious and think about, what is the main priorities when we talk about potentially paving. We have the pavilion that I think we all want to go through with, the garage, some of these other ideas that are all great ideas, but just when you leave here today, think about what are my priorities for this property.
And I don't know if the Park District, they usually do the fireworks. I don't know if the fireworks thing. But if they want to do it, maybe that is something that it's going to be like a, what do you call it, like a cost sharing where we build some of the stuff where they can utilize the property more. I don't know if there's any interest there, or their focus is more on this aquatic center and some of the other bigger projects they've got going on.
Certainly can have a conversation.
Jake, and one final question. Is there any opportunity to, even at a very small amount, have any sort of like a land conservation tax or something like that that we could add, even if it's $1 or $2 a resident, just for something to replenish that fund?
I'm not aware of that. I think over the last couple of years, I've had some pretty in-depth conversations with Attorney Euler on potential taxes. And I'm not aware of like a land conservation tax. As close as that we could get to that is a stormwater utility tax, but that wouldn't cover what we're looking here at all.
Well, I know that there are some communities out there, I think Park Ridge does this, where they have a voluntary, you can add to your water bill or something like that for their fireworks. They do some unbelievable fireworks show. We used to go there for years. And that was all paid for by the residents who threw in extra money throughout the year when they were paying their bill. And there was money that was directed towards that, so I don't know if that's totally out there.
So to take that to one more step, I know we're so common now, almost every retailer you go to, they say, do you want to round up?
Yeah.
I mean, can you round up like on the water bill as an option and extra 50 cents here and there? I don't know.
Whether
That'd be a nightmare for
right,
finance.
Kelly's like, what are you saying here, Rick?
Whether right or wrong, I'm always sensitive of, just since we tax property. I'm always sensitive of having that perception that we have our hand out, that we're asking for money. That's just my opinion.
You mean for rounding up on a bill? That's a choice then if they want to do it.
I'm still sensitive to that, but if the board was open to that and looking at that option,
I feel like
I
that's a
could
choice.
explore it.
It's not a requirement.
I do too.
And we also can still promote through the community foundation as well. We have our donations page that we can leave them to also donate to the village through the community foundation's website.
Some of it's marketing, getting out what it is that we want to do. So if it is something that we want to do that and we want to go ahead and direct people towards the foundation, if we did a marketing campaign, I'm just talking about, a voluntary marketing campaign, hey, do you want to see this here? We could look at things like that to see what the flavor is from the community. I mean, we all like this stuff, it's all great ideas, but is everybody else going to say, hey, I like it and I'm willing to put something in towards this, where it could all go through the foundation, which is a positive reflection upon us, something that we really wanted to do was work in conjunction with the McHenry County Foundation based on the last people who donated.
Well, and I don't know if the board has all seen it. We do have a brochure. They're out here that kind of push towards, focusing in on the pavilion and Rotary Park projects as well.
but we're trying to push them to the foundation.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
It's coming to us.
Go ahead, Rick.
No.
Kind of going along with what you had said, Ellen, just like talking about like getting more people knowing about things. I feel that if we could do it in a way where you guys could put a presentation together online and people can click on it at their ease and convenience. I don't know how many people actually get out to it when it's on a Saturday morning from like this time to this time, whatever day it is. I think it's easier for people to like look at things from the convenience of their home, and maybe we go ahead and push it out through multiple ways that way. And then if they wanted to, not like a GoFundMe, but like have an opportunity there if people want to give a donation after watching the video towards something, they could do it that way. I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know.
One thing with, the new budgeting software that we've been working on that helped us to prepare all of this is it's called Stories, which will allow us, like you're talking about on the website, to push it out in an easier way to digest than just the presentation. And that is something we do plan to do with this 5-year CIP when we put it out to the public.
And maybe we peel out the land conservancy, the parking property.
Tying it into the video that was created about Cary, that's a nice clip it's a great clip that I think a lot of people like, and it's it maybe tie that into like, I don't know, as part of a trailer for it or something. Because I know a lot of people really like that video clip.
Yeah, the software does allow us to put videos in, so we could definitely look into that.
So perhaps a
Is there-
line item for budgeting for the production of videos, because
Yes.
that's something in our typical wheelhouse. But
So we got Jake and Justin.
Is there an opportunity, like, from a, I guess we don't know from a legal standpoint or anything like that, but to, at the end, say, you know, an instant, if you would like to donate now, like, go ahead and there's that option right there as they're watching the video at the end or wherever during the video to go ahead and give a donation right then and there through clicking. Yeah.
Yeah, we push the foundation. Yeah.
You have to do it through the foundation.
We don't
It can't
have
just
to.
be
Well,
like.
we kind of set it up that way, though. That's kind of the board deciding when donations.
But if somebody's like, hey, yeah, you know, I'd like to throw in $25 to go ahead and towards it, do they have to go through the donation, or can they go ahead and click on, you know, after watching a video, just being like, yep, I would like to go ahead and donate, here's my information.
They could always just come here. Yeah.
I'm trying to make it easier for people. I don't want people to have to go through so many things for $25. Like, and then all those $25 add up to something else. If you're looking for like parking, you know, things, or not parking, car stickers and stuff like that. I'm just thinking, what's the easiest way to be able to get somebody to donate without having to go ahead and come in here and drop off money or to go through a thing? I mean, you're still being identified as somebody and you're earmarking it towards something. So it's public information still. It's not an anonymous thing, but it's just an easier format to be able to go ahead and just get that money to go ahead and put towards something that people want to see. So that's just my only thing is saying, how do we make it easier? Like, why do they have to come in here to go ahead and do it? Why do they have to? And I understand we did agree to that, you know, but I'm just trying to think, if it's still public, you know, and it's not an anonymous, I thought it was more for anonymous donations to go through that. But if people want to make a public donation, can't they just do something like that?
Absolutely.
Sure.
I would summarize by saying, let's not reinvent the wheel. If we've already got the foundation set up for these other routes, let's find a way to promote them more. We already have things in place to do exactly, you know, her great idea. Let's ask people, if you want to contribute specifically to X, Y, or Z, let's make it as easy as possible for them. Using the systems we already have.
Thank you.
Yeah, using the systems we already have in place. We don't need to reinvent them.
Right, so like Dale said, like just one click, like where they don't have to like,
Just like anything. A lot of times you watch anything and say, do you want to donate to this? Click here.
Yeah.
And then it directs them, whatever it is, to fill out the information one time.
yeah, love it.
Yep.
If that's possible. But then I also still going back to it, I don't know how everybody, we didn't really discuss it, and just going back to Rick's comment about like rounding up on a bill. I mean, I don't know, can we do something like that? Is that possible to do?
Maybe this is a separate conversation, but I don't know how rounding the bill goes with the donation policy where the board has have to approve each donation.
Is that considered a donation, or who said, did you say it was included in park bridges for whatever they wanted to do?
It was optional.
Optional, right. So I like things that are optional, and it's not a requirement. We're not making somebody do something, so,
We can look at that. Absolutely.
okay.
Well, let's look at, we'll come back, we'll look at some different opportunities, but I think the beauty of working with the Community Foundation, it is essentially a one-click thing. Where you press, we could have a click on it at the end of this thing, and the click brings you to the Community Foundation page, and you fill out your form, and what the project is for the Village of Cary, bam, you're done.
And I've never looked at it. Is it a real nice, easy form for
Yes.
somebody to fill out? It's like a no-brainer kind of, it's not going to take 5 minutes. It's going to be,
It's going to be as quick as anything else. It's a one click, you're in it.
okay.
Good stuff.
Before we leave this, could I just, I want to ask something, and maybe we set it aside for another time, but a lot of people on this board know I was very much involved getting to the point of having this property become a recreational facility. But then I lost 4 years, so I don't know what the heck happened. And then I come back and I see it's called Rotary Park. I don't have the connection with where we were and where we currently are. And again, it doesn't have to be time now, but I think it would be helpful, maybe I'll just speak for myself here, but I think to a degree it would be for Trustee Walrath as well, to kind of maybe bridge that time frame gap a little bit and to understand, because I'll tell you from my perspective,
park being called Rotary Park, I have a major disconnect with.
Cary Lake at Rotary Park.
Yeah, well, okay, but I don't get the Rotary Park piece. And I have a feeling that maybe a lot of the community doesn't get why it's called what it's called. And therefore, when you talk about making a donation, whether it's rounding up or some other sort of donation, are people thinking that I'm donating to the Rotary, not to the conservation of the biggest recreational facility this town's ever going to have? So again, it's probably 2 or 3 hours worth of conversation outside of budget meeting, but I think it's an important one because I remember, as do you, Mark, all the conversation, and Jake too, all the conversation that was had about the money being given to the village to keep this thing so it doesn't turn into, a bunch of reeds and an ugly property, something that we could continue to use as an amenity for the community. And if we don't have a way to keep it that way financially, eventually might be 20 years down the road, that could happen. So I do think that long term, we have to come up with something. And if it's pennies on the dollar and rounding up, so be it. But those are pennies on the dollar that we don't have now.
Right.
And I think that needs to be perhaps a sidebar.
So I think maybe why don't we get through this part of it and we can have a healthy discussion at a committee meeting on that, because that would be a whole thing. And I agree with you. When you look at, there is a rationale why it's called Cary Lake.
I'm sure there is.
But we can go into that.
Well, it's messaging again.
You're right. It's messaging.
And it to me, again, like I say, it's a Village of Cary Park. But if you hear Rotary and you don't think of Village of Cary Park.
Sure.
Good stuff.
One other item just for consideration in the future for our Rotary Park is the addition of Kayak Lockers. This is one item, again, with the recent construction of that trail down to the new launch right by the parking lot. This is an item that maybe would have potential revenue income to maybe pay for itself, to give some residents the opportunity to not have to trailer their kayaks and canoes and things like that over to the park. They can rent a storage locker on site and then just pull them out as needed. And then down the road for a future kind of spin-off of the bike sharing concept. So you can see like the Divvy bikes in Chicago and so forth. There are some communities and lakeside communities that are doing the same concept with kayaks. So they eliminate the need for a third-party vendor and do it all through it's still a vendor, but it's not staffed by rental, and it unlocks the boat for them to use. So in summary, these are just some of the projects that we indicated this morning. And obviously, some of the ones highlighted in blue are dependent upon the status of that Roadside grant, and that would then trigger what the next steps are in the budget itself.
So we'll move into water and sanitation. One of the big projects is Tower 4 and that water tower complete painting. That would be moved into next fiscal year. It is currently out to rebid with a bid opening on February 1st. And then it'd be for a summer painting. And then we have in fiscal year 25 and 26, a touch-up painting on Tower 2, and then a complete painting on Tower 1. Here's the Bright Oaks water main replacement project, which was designed 2 years ago with construction in fiscal year 24. This is a new project that we're adding in here, and it would be dependent on the establishment of PFAS water quality standards by the IEPA and the US EPA. This is almost a $2 million project. Essentially, an activated carbon system retrofit would remove the PFAS down to the levels that would be accepted. Again, though, this would only be necessary if the level or the quality standards were put into place and we didn't reach them.
So there's a likelihood, depending on those standards, that we may not need to do anything, because there is no limit yet.
The press release that you guys put out with Lake in the Hills was very nice, and you guys did a great job.
So here's the water meter replacement program. Currently, we are targeting 2026. Part of this was due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We suspended for all of 2020 meter installs and then part of 2021 as well.
Well, we have 100% compliance by 25, 26.
That is our hope, yes. There's about 1,400 meters remaining.
And at that point, as we get later into the stages of the program, all the low-hanging fruit is completed. So there's a lot of locations where we need to maybe do some service valve replacements and digs along with the meter installs. So that's we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel.
Here is a new program that's being proposed. This is based around the Lead Service Line Replacement Notification Act that was passed. With this, municipalities need to complete a service line inventory. So we need to inventory the number of lead service lines in the village. Currently, there are 30 known lead service lines. However, under this act, galvanized lines are also to be treated as lead services, so that number could increase. We're proposing 30,000 each year, and this is actually because under the act, if lead service lines are encountered, let's say during a main repair or a valve repair, the municipality is required to replace it. So the final...
To the house?
Yes, from basically from the main all the way into the house, whether it's into the meter or within a certain distance from the edge of the house and internal plumbing. So the dollars here are not just for our costs. We would work to do some of it in-house, like what we normally do with the service lines and the valves. But because it involves some connections to the homes, these dollars are contractor costs as well.
So the actual inventory has to be submitted by 2024, and then the completing, the replacement of all the lead service lines isn't until 2042. So there's time.
So it is a significant effort, especially for older communities that have a lot of lead service lines. The city of Chicago probably comes to mind as one that's going to have quite the handful to hit to do 7% per year. So luckily, our numbers are not very large, but
we don't
we're still there.
Because through Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, I'm on all these calls with these mayors that this is a huge thing, huge. And just the funding to try to get it, we're lucky we don't have that.
So when did they stop implementing lead pipes? Like, what do you know about what year? Like, they stopped using them?
I'll say the 70s, but John, do you touch on that?
When did they stop using lead?
When did they stop using lead service lines?
Oh, God, it depends on the area of money. It went out of use probably 40s and 50s in most communities, but the areas like the city of Chicago are still using them all the way from the 80s. That's why there's the age of Cary, most of them new and the older sections that they have in land sealed and things of them have been replaced.
Thank you.
So here's a summary table of some of the projects for the water fund. We will need to start the new water sewer rate study. That cost would be split with the sanitation fund. And one of the projects that could be evaluated is a potential emergency water interconnect with Crystal Lake. This was actually recommended from the recently completed risk and resilience study that we completed this year.
What does that mean? Does that mean if we have problems with water, we get something from Crystal Lake? Is that
Precisely.
Yes.
It'd be a two-way benefit. So if we had, whether there's too many wells were out of service for emergencies or not enough production due to demand and drought and so forth, if one community had available surplus and the other needed it could be flowed either way. So it'd only be utilized in an emergency and with mutual agreement by both communities.
So you don't see a need to have that sooner than in 26, 27?
It's a placeholder at this point, so it could move. We definitely want to, we haven't had formal discussions with Crystal Lake yet, obviously, but once we do our water rate study this coming fiscal year, that'll be one of the topics that we bring up and see if it does slide around in the programming. And that goes for all the water and sewer improvements you see here, especially beyond that gray line. Anything to the right of it might get shuffled around with the water sewer rate study review.
Here's just a few more of the projects for the water fund. These are primarily well house maintenance projects that were based on the reserve study we completed, windows, roofs, heaters. Here is one of the other ARPA-funded projects that we've discussed before. It's the fine screen raking system. Engineering is currently underway and is expected to go to bid this winter. So the current estimate is between $470,000 and $500,000.
And that's the actual type of design that was being recommended at this point. So it's the first time I've been able to kind of show you exactly what it would look like.
Here's a list of the other sanitation projects, including lining, some major maintenance repairs at the wastewater treatment plant, as well as SCADA equipment for the lift stations and 3 lift station rehabs over the next 3 years. And then this last slide I have for you is the water and sanitation fleet. These are vehicles that we purchased rather than include them in the lease program. And this is due to the dedicated revenue source from the Water Sewers Fund. The larger costs on this list include a dump truck with a plow in fiscal year 24, and then possibly a new Vector truck in fiscal year 25.
Okay, so a lot of recommended projects here in the 5-year CIP. In the 5-year CIP. So this is a summary table of all of those projects. On the left-hand side, you can see all the different funds, and then going across the different fiscal years, and the total cost for a 5-year of $26 million. On the right-hand side there, you see your 5-year projected funding and funding sources. As Jake noted earlier, no funding source for land conservancy as well as capital projects. So a lot of recommended projects in this 5-year, but if you look all the way to the right, quite a few future unfunded projects, will almost totaling $50 million.
There's a lot of information, obviously on this slide. Just kind of a quick snapshot of where we're trending and what we're looking at. I will add the one item here to the capital projects fund is that on March 12th at our next budget meeting, we'll probably talk about a transfer, general fund surplus that we transfer to capital projects. Just as we've been very conservative here as we've gone through the pandemic about our general fund revenues, and we've come out of, we're hopefully getting out of the pandemic in a strong position financially that will allow us to transfer some of those general fund dollars that we have over to capital projects to be able to take care of some of this infrastructure. So that's the one fund that needs a little TLC. The rest of them, we have some plan in place, but we need to keep running on vehicle and equipment, and then obviously land conservancy. So chew on this. If there's any immediate questions, we can answer it. Otherwise, I'm happy to talk offline with you all on this.
I mean, there's a lot of information here. Staff has done a remarkable job, as usual, putting this together in a way that we can digest this. But I would suggest between now and our next budget meeting, if you have any questions, I would welcome a meeting with anybody, with Jake and Director Morimoto about any questions or concerns that you have or ideas that you want to have that really help prepare you to get into that next meeting. So you have because this will be a part of everything that we do next time. But it's a lot to digest in a 2-hour time frame. So take some time, go through this again, make some notes, and I'd love to sit down and talk to you about things.
Let me just have one more slide.
This slide is just, everyone's favorite.
As you can see, I was trying to, I wanted to motion to adjourn.
No, just a refresher slide of, source options, revenue source options to consider for, those funds that don't have funding sources or, those unfunded future projects.
One of the, as long as it's kind of budget related too, I had a great conversation with the resident about our cable services and our internet providers and that stuff. Is there any, I guess I don't know who I would ask, maybe whoever, I'm throwing it out there to staff, whatever. Is there any possibility that we could acquire as a municipality an internet service where because how this all came together was AT&T doesn't provide services throughout the whole community. It's just in pockets. It's either Comcast or whoever it was. We deal with this all the time, and he had proposed, when I explained why it's only in certain things, he explained that there are some municipalities that do offer that. I don't know what the cost would be, but he had asked, and I said, well, I'm going to have a budget meeting tomorrow. I'll just find out about something like this. Is that something that we could do? And that could be a potential revenue source, because he had suggested that we would bill for it, just like a water bill or a line item on a tax bill or something to get that. So it's equal throughout our whole community.
So you own this, the village owns the system, you're the provider.
Yes. I'm assuming that's what he was saying, that, I found it a fascinating concept.
You're making it as a utility for the residents instead of a business service.
Yeah.
But the only drawback then, do they not have options? Like, if I don't like Comcast and I can switch to AT&T, I would no
You
longer
can't
have
switch
that
because
option.
AT&T is only in certain areas in
Right,
town.
it's
It's
in my
not.
area.
He wants it. Pardon me?
It's in my area. But my question is, but even if it wasn't, do I then not have the option? Like, if I don't like the village's services, can I not then switch to Comcast?
I would think that it would be just another option.
Okay.
I think that, I said, I don't know. This could be an opportunity. I have no idea how it would even roll out or how it would be, but, I thought it was kind of an ingenious kind of a thing.
It's interesting. I think I'd be interested.
Well, how sometimes there's Wi-Fi and people make Wi-Fi available in downtown districts or, whatever, I go through all these different things. I mean, is that, I don't know. I just thought, with the way everything is going, that, this might be an opportunity.
Let me just ask the rationale. Is the rationale that we would make money on it?
We could.
Okay, I just don't know if we can make money on it, yes, but if we can't, then I don't see why we would put more work into something that doesn't make any sense to maintain something and do all this stuff unless we're going to be getting something.
Well, I would think it would be that we would partner with another provider, like the utility companies do, like Comcast or ComEd, you may be buying it through ComEd, but they're buying it through somebody else.
Correct.
I don't know. I just thought.
Opportunity
I think it's worth
to
looking.
bring revenue in to cover some of these items. That's not a tax on somebody else's service.
Correct.
So that service in and of itself has some profit built in. That's why AT&T and Comcast are in that business. So we would have the opportunity, potentially, to provide this service to the residents at either the same rate they're currently paying for the same service or maybe a little bit better, and not be providing or not be taxing our residents who get revenue back into the providing service.
Right.
You don't have home internet, which I can't imagine somebody doesn't. You have the opportunity not to participate.
Right.
And to Kim's point, if you still want to stick with AT&T or Comcast for bundling and savings reasons, you have the opportunity to opt out. That part right there is where it's confusing to me, or to me, I'd have to explain, because if it's a utility, I don't get the option to get my water from somewhere else. I don't get the option to get my sewer from somewhere else. A little different opportunity or business model there, but just that concept of we have to go into it providing something that's attractive to the residents other than just funding our projects.
Well, if you think back about a conversation we had at a committee, or it was even a board meeting, about how when we were looking at switching to ComEd, correct me if I'm wrong, am I dreaming this? That we would get a rebate from the provider, kind of a thing. So I would assume it would be something like that.
You bring
The aggregation program?
In that situation, ComEd still provides it.
Correct.
So we also,
They still do the maintenance of it.
Right.
when people are using Comcast and your bill and your tax bill, we receive some revenue for Comcast and AT&T.
Yeah, we do.
So we would lose out on that.
Franchise fee.
Yeah.
I just thought
I think it's worth looking into. It's
You
interesting.
get more than you can get from
There would
franchise
be a
fees, sure.
substantial investment.
Yeah, that's
Right.
project.
We got nothing but money. We only have $15 million in unfunded projects. Okay.
In the future meetings, is there going to be a conversation had about how you could fund some of this stuff and borrowing costs, which we all know are going to be going up? So, thinking about potentially taking debt while rates are still attractive as opposed to a year or 2 years down the road.
Well, like for road funds and like.
For some of the, we've talked about road fund borrowing numerous times, right? It's just, everybody knows that in the next 2 years, rates are likely going to go up by 2%. And we're talking about millions of dollars of need, and that costs a lot more money than if you have to try to fund it 24 versus 22.
Well, I believe in March 12th, we'll have talked about various options.
Well, I'm turned off all the way.
Got you off your time?
Every time, already?
I will, there we go. I'll always say that if the board wants to talk about potential options, funding options, or issuing that, we can always have that conversation. You know, sure that Mike will always be ready to, you know, while he's here, to have that discussion. You know, March 12th, you know, we're focusing more on not the issuing debt or not issuing debt, but just on all funds and generally the general fund. So whenever the board wants to have the conversation, we can.
Well, we did chat about this previously because we were looking at some of our surrounding municipalities that are having issues with roads and deteriorating and whether we should be doing something, being proactive about it. So I do think at some point we do need to have that, not at the March 12th meeting, but we need to set up something to discuss that again.
We can, I think my initial thought would probably be have just a more robust discussion next time when we come back and we bring information to follow up on that road discussion and potential funding options. That can be a little bit more robust and branch a little bit more outside of the roads and just in general the debt issue question.
Right. And just looking at this too, I thought we had a discussion about where a lot of us agreed about the places for eating tax.
Yeah, I think more the luxury
Yeah.
taxes
So,
are.
I'm like-
You just always put it in there just so you're aware.
But I mean,
Yeah,
well, I mean, no, I understand why it's there. I'm just thinking like, I thought I don't know if most of us said yes to it, or, so that's why I'm confused, like, why was, we didn't vote on it, or?
There was no actual vote.
There's no action on it? Because I feel like we talked about that a long time ago.
Well, and that's the conversation that we need to come back on. We're waiting for some data from the state.
Okay.
It's all lumped into that vehicle sticker discussion. So once we have that, there was also the question, I believe, about when we could do the referendum if we wanted to. So there are a few items. I think there were 3 questions that were posed by the board, and I'm just waiting until we have all of that information to bring it back.
But in the meantime, we've lost all that time for places for eating tax. That's something we could have implemented a while ago. So is that something that we can talk about?
I don't know if that was a popular.
I thought it was because it was more considered something that's a luxury. If you go out to eat, that's a luxury. You're going to go ahead and, I mean, if you don't have the money to go out to eat, you're not going to. But it's not something like you need water, you need, something like that. So that's why I thought that we spoke about it, saying that was like one of the more favorable options. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I thought.
My recollection that we did say that when we said, let's get all these facts first and then we could make a decision. We wanted to look at what would it be for a vehicle tax, what would it be for some of these others, and then kind of go back to it, circle back towards it. And I think what Jake is saying is we're ready to, as soon as he gets the rest of this information, can circle back to it.
I just don't want it to go on too long because I just feel like it's been so long, and then again, we're just losing that revenue from the timestamp that we haven't, at least for a luxury, like as Kim had said, a luxury tax standpoint, where it's not something that's,
right. I understand.
Forced to use.
Right.
Yep, we'll be circling back on it. Yeah. I have some opinions about the place for eating tax. That's a discussion for another day.
So restaurant. Yeah. And that would be, we would have to manage that. That wouldn't go through the state and we'd get a check. We would have to be responsible.
Great job, guys.
Yeah, this was
Thank you
really,
very much.
really good.
Yeah.
I really
You guys back in the cheap seats. Thanks for everything you did.
Yes.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Any opposed?